Okay, so you are caring for an aging parent. Maybe this started gradually. A few extra phone calls per week, help with groceries, driving to medical appointments, and then one event, a fall, a diagnosis, a moment where it became clear that independent living was no longer fully safe, changed the scope of the commitment in a way you may not have fully accounted for yet. Here is the version of this situation most families walk into. It will be temporary, or at least manageable. The parent will recover, stabilize, or reach a plateau where the level of care required stops escalating. The family will share the responsibility fairly among the siblings. Medicare or some form of insurance will cover most of the cost. And the personal financial impact on the adult children involved will be contained enough that everyone can absorb it without significant consequence to their own careers and retirements. None of those four assumptions tends to hold in the way families expect when the situation actually runs its course. What actually happens in most families navigating elder care for the first time is that the costs arrive faster than the early phase suggested, escalate more steeply than any initial estimate accounted for, fall more heavily on one family member than any agreement made at the beginning implied, and last significantly longer than anyone involved was initially willing to say out loud. This is not a story about an unusual situation. According to AARP, approximately 53 million Americans were providing unpaid care to an adult family member as of 2020. Most of them did not set out to be in that role with a plan. Most of them discovered the financial dimensions of it the same way you discover most things in elder care, after the decision was already made and the commitment was already real. Before we get into the numbers, we need to establish what care situation we are actually describing, because elder care covers a range of circumstances with dramatically different cost structures, legal frameworks, and financial consequences. There is aging in place with informal family support, meaning the parent lives in their own home and receives unpaid help from adult children or other family members for tasks like transportation, grocery shopping, meal preparation, medication management, and household maintenance. This version appears free until you start accounting for what the caregiver's time, career interruptions, and out-of-pocket expenditures actually cost in measurable dollars over a multi-year arc. There is aging in place with paid in-home care, meaning a professional caregiver provides some portion of the daily assistance the parent requires. The care may be part-time, a few hours each day, or intensive enough that it approaches full-time coverage. The cost difference between these two levels is substantial, and the transition between them tends to happen faster than families plan for. There is assisted living, a residential facility providing housing, meals, and personal care services in a community setting, typically designed for individuals who need help with daily activities, but do not require the continuous medical supervision of a nursing home. There is memory care, a specialized residential setting designed specifically for individuals with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia, with secured environments, higher staff ratios, and dementia-specific programming, all reflected in costs that run materially higher than standard assisted living. And there is skilled nursing facility care, the most medically intensive and most expensive residential care option. For individuals who require around-the-clock nursing supervision, complex medication management, or intensive rehabilitation following a hospitalization, most families cycle through several of these levels over the care arc rather than remaining at one level throughout, and the progression almost always moves from less expensive to more expensive. Not the reverse. Now, here's the insight that changes how every subsequent number in this conversation should be understood. Most families approach elder care as if it is an expense with a stable monthly cost. The parent needs a defined level of care. That care costs a defined monthly amount. The family budgets for that amount. The situation eventually resolves. Simple arithmetic across a finite period. That is not how elder care works financially, and the gap between that assumption and reality is where most of the financial damage in this situation occurs. Elder care is an escalating commitment. In almost every prolonged care situation, the intensity of care required increases over time rather than remaining constant. A parent who needs 15 hours of in-home support per week in year 1 may need 35 to 40 hours in year 3. A parent in standard assisted living in year 1 may need to transition to memory care in year 3 at a cost 40 to 50% higher. A parent in memory care may eventually require skilled nursing facility placement at a cost that is another 50 to 70% higher still. Each transition typically does not happen on a predictable schedule. It happens in response to a health event, a fall, a hospitalization, a cognitive decline threshold that compresses the timeline and arrives before the family has organized the resources for the next level. At the same time that care intensity and cost are escalating, the capacity of the adult child managing the situation is often declining. Careers interrupted to provide care are generating lower income. Retirement contributions reduced to fund care are compounding less. The emotional and logistical burden of a long caregiving arc frequently affects professional performance in ways with downstream financial consequences that are real but accumulate quietly. The Genworth Cost of Care Survey, which has tracked elder care costs annually since 2004, shows that costs across all care categories have increased at an average annual rate of approximately 3 to 4% over more than a decade. A care expense of $60,000 per year today will cost approximately $85,000 per year in 8 years at that compounding rate. The expense is not static even when the level of care is. And the level of care is almost never static across a multi-year care arc. Let's start with the most common entry point into formal elder care, which is paid in-home support. The parent remains in their own home or in the adult child's home, and a professional caregiver provides some portion of the daily assistance they require. According to Genworth's 2023 Cost of Care Survey, the national median hourly rate for a home health aide, a licensed professional who can assist with personal care and some clinically supervised tasks, is $27 per hour. For a homemaker or companion aide assisting with cooking, housekeeping, errands, and companionship without personal care, the median is approximately $26 per hour. At 20 hours of care per week, the monthly cost is approximately $2,080 to $2,340. At 40 hours per week, which is often described as full-time daytime coverage only, the monthly cost doubles to $4,160 to $4,060 or roughly $50,000 up to $56,000 annually. Live-in care, where a professional caregiver lives in the home and provides around-the-clock availability, costs between $250 and $350 per day at the national median, translating to $7,500 to $10,500 per month. There is a hiring structure decision embedded in these costs that most families encounter without fully thinking through its implications. In-home caregivers can be hired directly by the family as private contractors or engaged through a licensed home care agency. Direct hire is less expensive per hour, but the family becomes the employer and assumes responsibility for payroll taxes, workers' compensation coverage, backup arrangements when the caregiver is ill or unavailable, and the legal obligations that come with private employment. A home care agency handles those obligations and provides coverage continuity, but charges a 30 to 50% premium above the caregiver's actual pay rate to do so. The family paying $27 per hour through an agency is typically paying the actual caregiver $16 to $18 of that figure, with the remainder funding the agency's coordination, insurance, payroll administration, and margin. Neither structure is wrong. Both have hidden costs that the quoted hourly rate does not fully reveal. When in-home care reaches its practical limits, the next decision is a residential care facility. This is where the monthly cost of elder care moves into territory that surprises families even after they have been managing in-home care expenditures for months. According to Genworth's 2023 Cost of Care data, assisted living carries a national median monthly cost of $4,995. This base rate covers room, board, and a standard level of personal care services. What it does not cover, and what most families discover only after signing the admission agreement, is the additional care fees that most assisted living facilities charge for higher levels of personal assistance. A resident requiring help with 3 or more activities of daily living, rather than the standard package, typically incurs additional care surcharges of $500 to $1,500 per month above the base. Medication management, incontinence care, escort services to meals and activities, and specialized dietary accommodations each carry their own line item fees at most facilities. A family that budgets for the advertised monthly rate without reading the full fee schedule frequently receives a first monthly statement that is $800 to $1,400 above what they planned. Memory care facilities carry a national median cost of $6,160 per month, reflecting the secured unit design, the higher staff-to-resident ratios mandated for dementia-specific care, and the specialized therapeutic programming. In high-cost markets, including California, New York, Massachusetts, and the Pacific Northwest, memory care costs regularly exceed $8,000 to $9,000 per month for standard accommodations. Skilled nursing facilities carry a national median of $8,669 per month for a semi-private room and $9,733 per month for a private room, according to the same survey. In major metropolitan areas, private room rates frequently exceed $12,000 to $15,000 per month. Now consider what a realistic care arc for a parent with Alzheimer's disease costs in total. The average duration from diagnosis to death is 8 to 12 years. 3 years of in-home care averaging $4,200 per month, followed by 3 years of memory care at $6,800 per month, followed by 2 years of skilled nursing at $10,500 per month, produces a total 8-year cost of $151,200 plus $244,800 plus $252,000. A combined care cost of $648,000 from one parent's Alzheimer's progression before any adjustment for the 3 to 4% annual cost escalation that compounds those figures upward in later years. Now, here is the misunderstanding that sits underneath almost every elder care financial conversation, and that costs families more money in aggregate than any other single factor in this space. Most families believe Medicare will cover the cost of long-term care for an aging parent. It will not. Medicare is health insurance for acute medical care. It covers hospitalizations, physician visits, surgeries, prescription drugs under Part D, and short-term skilled rehabilitation. What Medicare does not cover under any provision, and regardless of how many years the parent paid into the system, is custodial care. Custodial care is the assistance with daily living activities, bathing, dressing, eating, moving safely from a bed to a chair, managing medication schedules, that constitutes the overwhelming majority of what an aging parent actually needs across the full arc of a care situation. The specific Medicare skilled nursing benefit that most families misunderstand works as follows. Medicare will cover care in a skilled nursing facility for up to 100 days, but only if the patient was admitted to a hospital as an inpatient for at least 3 consecutive nights immediately before the nursing home admission. Only if the nursing facility holds Medicare certification, and only if the care being provided is genuinely skilled in nature, meaning it requires the clinical expertise of a registered nurse, physical therapist, or comparable licensed professional. Days 1 through 20 are covered in full. Days 21 through 100 require a patient copayment that was $194.50 per day in 2024. After day 100, Medicare coverage ends entirely, regardless of the patient's continued medical needs or functional status. A parent who enters an assisted living facility because they can no longer safely manage at home receives zero Medicare coverage for that placement on any day. Not for the first month, not after a hospitalization, not ever. The cost is private pay from admission. This is the central planning gap in most elder care financial situations because it creates a funding requirement of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars that families did not account for because they believed a coverage existed that does not. Medicaid does cover long-term custodial care, but Medicaid eligibility for long-term care requires that the individual have essentially exhausted their own financial resources first. Countable asset limits for Medicaid long-term care eligibility in most states require the applicant to have $2,000 or less in individual countable assets. The path from a parent with $250,000 in savings to Medicaid eligibility is the path of spending nearly all of it on care. And Medicaid's 5-year look-back rule means that asset transfers made in the 5 years before applying for Medicaid can be scrutinized and potentially penalized, disqualifying the applicant from coverage for a defined period based on the value of assets transferred. The Medicaid pathway for long-term care is more nuanced than the basic spend-down description suggests, and the nuances matter financially in ways that are worth understanding before the situation requires applying. The 5-year look-back rule means that any assets transferred by the Medicaid applicant within 5 years before applying can be treated as a disqualifying transfer, resulting in a penalty period during which Medicaid will not pay for care even if the applicant is otherwise eligible. The length of the penalty period is calculated by dividing the value of the transferred assets by the average monthly cost of nursing home care in the state. A parent who transferred $60,000 to an adult child 2 years before applying for Medicaid, in a state where average nursing home care costs $7,500 per month, would face an 8-month penalty period. During those 8 months, care costs must still be paid privately even though the transferred assets are gone. For married couples, the Medicaid rules include what are called spousal impoverishment protections, designed to prevent the healthy spouse from being rendered destitute by the care costs of the ill spouse. The community spouse, the one remaining at home, is allowed to retain a minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance from the ill spouse's income and can keep a portion of the couple's combined assets called the Community Spouse Resource Allowance, which varies by state but as of 2024 ranges from approximately $30,828 for yen, $154,440 in countable assets. These protections are meaningful but still leave the community spouse in a materially reduced financial position compared to before the care costs began. Medicaid planning. The legitimate legal process of structuring assets and spending to qualify for Medicaid coverage while preserving resources for the community spouse or heirs is a specialized area of elder law. Irrevocable trusts, compliant annuities, and strategic asset titling are among the tools available. This planning must generally be done at least 5 years before Medicaid is needed to be fully effective, which is precisely the planning horizon that most families have not reached when the care conversation becomes urgent. Here is where the financial cost of elder care shifts from the parent's resources to the adult child's. When a parent requires significant ongoing care, someone in the family typically provides a large portion of it informally and without compensation. The Family Caregiver Alliance reports that the average informal caregiver is a 49-year-old woman who works outside the home and provides approximately 20 hours of unpaid care per week alongside her existing employment. 20 hours per week is a part-time job added on top of a full-time one. The financial consequences accumulate across multiple dimensions at the same time. Career earnings decline. A MetLife study calculated that women who reduce work hours or leave the workforce to provide elder care lose an average of $324,000 over their lifetimes in combined wages, pension benefits, and Social Security income. Even caregivers who remain fully employed frequently decline promotions that would require additional travel, pass over professional development opportunities that conflict with care schedules, and accept lower complexity roles with more schedule flexibility, compressing career earnings in ways that are real but individually difficult to measure precisely. Retirement contributions decline or stop during the caregiving years. A caregiver who reduces work hours by 30% loses not just 30% of salary, but also the employer retirement match on the contributions that would have been made, the tax-advantaged contribution room for that year that cannot be recovered, and the compounding those contributions would have generated across the remaining working years before retirement. Social Security benefits decline permanently. Social Security is calculated on 35 years of earnings history. Years of reduced or absent earnings due to caregiving replace higher earning years in the benefit formula, permanently reducing the eventual monthly payment. A caregiver who steps back from full employment for 3 years does not merely lose 3 years of contributions. They reduce the Social Security benefit they will receive for the rest of their own life. There is one dimension of elder care economics that financial discussions consistently underweight relative to how frequently it determines outcomes. When a parent requires care and there are multiple adult children, the distribution of that caregiving responsibility is almost never equal in practice. Geographic proximity, career flexibility, relationship closeness, and individual temperament produce a situation where one sibling absorbs the substantial majority of the hands-on caregiving burden, while others contribute financially, occasionally, or minimally. The sibling providing most of the informal care is simultaneously absorbing the career and retirement consequences described above, while the more distant siblings largely are not. The financial inequity compounds when the parent's estate is subsequently divided equally among all children according to a will written long before the care situation existed. The primary caregiving sibling contributed years of labor and career sacrifice worth tens of thousands of dollars in foregone income and may receive the same inheritance share as the sibling who visited for major holidays. Families that address this proactively through formal personal care agreements that compensate the primary caregiver from the parent's assets while the parent is alive, or through estate adjustments that recognize the unequal labor contribution, handle the situation more fairly, and generate fewer post-death family conflicts. A personal care agreement is a contract between the parent and the caregiving adult child, drafted by an elder law attorney, documenting the services to be provided and the compensation to be paid from the parent's assets. It serves two purposes simultaneously. It fairly compensates the caregiver for a real economic contribution, and because the payments reduce the parent's assets in a documented, legitimate manner, they can be part of Medicaid planning without triggering the look-back penalty that an undocumented transfer would create. Families that avoid the compensation conversation because it feels financially crass, or because the sibling dynamics make it uncomfortable, tend to resolve the inequity later through estrangement, through contested estate proceedings, or through the quiet resentment of a family relationship that never recovers from the unacknowledged imbalance. Before we look at what outcomes actually look like across the full range, it is worth addressing the insurance products specifically designed to cover these costs, because understanding why most families do not have it explains much of why the care cost problem is as severe as it is. Long-term care insurance provides a defined daily or monthly benefit for covered care expenses, typically including in-home care, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing facility costs. Premiums are calculated based on the age and health of the applicant at the time of purchase. A 55-year-old couple purchasing a joint long-term care policy in 2024 with a benefit of $5,000 per month per person, a 3-year benefit period, and a 90-day elimination period before coverage begins would pay approximately $2,500 to $3,500 per year in combined premiums. The same coverage purchased at 65 costs approximately twice as much. At 70, it is difficult to qualify medically and costs 3 to 4 times the 55-year-old premium. At 75, many applicants are declined based on pre-existing conditions. This is why the window for affordable long-term care insurance closes earlier than most people realize, and why conversations about it tend to happen after that window has passed. The family whose parent is 84 and in need of care cannot retroactively solve the coverage gap. The family member who is 52 and healthy can still make a decision that changes the financial picture of their own future care. Alternative hybrid products, life insurance policies with long-term care riders, allow policyholders to use accumulated death benefit to fund care costs, with any unused benefit passing to heirs at death. These have gained market share as traditional long-term care premiums increased and carriers exited the standalone market. They are not equivalent in coverage mechanics, but address the most common objection to standalone coverage: paying premiums for years and never using the benefit. To understand what happens when these costs compound without planning, consider the pattern that plays out in middle-income families continuously. A 57-year-old woman becomes the primary caregiver for her 84-year-old mother following a stroke that leaves significant functional impairment. The initial plan is to supplement in-home care with her own informal support. She reduces work hours by 25% to manage appointments and coordination. The income reduction is $21,000 per year. The in-home aid costs $2,600 per month. After 16 months, the mother's needs exceed what in-home care can safely manage. She transitions to assisted living at $5,400 per month. Her Social Security of $1,750 per month covers $21,000 of the $64,800 annual cost, leaving $43,800 per year in private pay. The mother's savings of $160,000 begin depleting at approximately $3,650 per month above the Social Security offset. In month 22 of the assisted living stay, the mother develops significant cognitive decline and requires transfer to the memory care unit at an additional $1,900 per month. Monthly private pay gap becomes $5,550. The remaining savings of approximately $80,000 will be exhausted in roughly 14 months. When the savings are gone, Medicaid application begins. The process takes 3 to 5 months. Someone covers the gap. The most available source is the daughter, who has already lost $31,500 in reduced income over 18 months and reduced her own retirement contributions by $9,000 across the same period. Her personal financial impact from a care situation she did not financially plan for approaches $40,000 before the parent's assets are even exhausted. Now let's look at what the full picture produces at both ends of the planning range. In the optimistic scenario, the family had the difficult conversation years before it was urgent. The parent, at age 74, still fully independent, sat with an elder law attorney and a financial planner, and made 3 decisions. They purchased a long-term care insurance policy. At 74, the policy was not inexpensive, approximately $5,200 per year for a benefit of $5,500 per month for up to 3 years, but it converted an open-ended liability into a defined and budgeted annual cost. They executed a durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy designating one adult child as the primary decision-maker, eliminating the multi-sibling coordination problem before care was needed. And they documented assets, preferences, and wishes comprehensively enough that the adult children could implement decisions rather than debate them under pressure. When significant care is needed at 83, the long-term care insurance covers $5,500 of the $6,200 monthly memory care cost. Social Security and a small pension cover $2,100 per month. The monthly private pay gap is approximately $600 compared to $4,450 without the insurance policy. The parent's savings fund 7 additional years of care above the insurance coverage period. The designated primary caregiver is reimbursed for documented care coordination time through a formal personal care agreement drawn from the parent's assets, partially offsetting the career impact. In the realistic scenario, no planning occurred before the crisis. An emergency hospitalization at 86 following a fall leads to a skilled nursing facility stay for rehabilitation. During this period, the family learns the parent has $125,000 in savings, no long-term care insurance, and Social Security of $1,580 per month. Medicare covers 20 days in full. Then the daily copayment period, then at day 101 coverage ends. The family faces an immediate discharge decision without preparation. Assisted living at $5,600 per month minus $1,580 in Social Security income leaves $4,020 per month in private pay. The $125,000 in savings will be exhausted in approximately 31 months. The adult child managing the transition reduces work hours throughout the process, losing $17,500 per year in income and $6,800 per year in retirement contributions. After 3 years, the combined career and retirement impact on the adult child is approximately $73,000 in addition to the $125,000 in parent assets consumed before Medicaid eligibility begins. The combined 2-generation financial impact of a care situation that no one financially planned for exceeds $198,000 from a family that entered it believing the costs would somehow be manageable. The gap between those two outcomes is not primarily about the size of the parent's original savings. It is about 3 decisions that were available to both families and made by only one of them: the long-term care insurance purchase, the legal document execution, and the designation of a primary decision-maker with an agreed compensation structure. Those 3 decisions, made years before care was needed, changed every subsequent financial number in the situation. The absence of those 3 decisions produced a fundamentally different financial outcome from an otherwise similar starting position. The mistake most families make when a parent's care needs begin to emerge is treating the situation as an immediate logistical problem rather than a long-term financial commitment requiring the same planning rigor as a business exit or a retirement. Transition. The costs are not small. They are not temporary. They do not plateau at a manageable level and stay there. They escalate, and they are not covered by Medicare the way most families assume until a skilled nursing facility billing statement arrives at the end of the coverage period and corrects the assumption. The families that come through elder care without financial catastrophe are not the ones with more resources. They are the ones who planned earlier than felt necessary, who bought long-term care insurance before diagnosis made it unavailable and age made it unaffordable, who had legal documents in place before the emergency requiring them, who designated a primary decision maker and agreed on a compensation structure before the inequity became a grievance. The cost of a parent's care in the final chapter of their life is real, specific, and escalating in a structure that is largely predictable even when the duration is not. Treating it that way before the situation forces the conversation is the difference between families that navigate it and families consumed by it.